Hi. So, I think that was thunder. I wanted to share some interesting research that I've done recently. People keep talking about where they want to sell their books, obviously, because they have books, where they're buying books, and I've been digging into this. And as as business owners, as nonprofit leaders, as people who are professionals, um, I think it's very interesting that, you know, we want our books to appear at Barnes and Noble. We want our books to appear at Target. We want our books at, maybe at Walmart, at Sam's Club, at grocery stores. We want our books out at all of these places, but something we have to realize is that it's a vanity thing. And yeah, I want to, you know, I want my book to be available all over the place and, you know, basically be like Oprah famous. I think that would be fabulous. And having my book in a bookstore that is big like Barnes and Noble, or, having it on the shelf at Target is awesome. And that, feeds me in here. So I'll be honest with you about that. I do like that kind of stuff. But I've done some really interesting research, and I was thinking about how this reflects on the book market in general. So let me give you some statistics here. So first of all, I looked at book sales at Barnes and Noble, and they have been dropping. In 2012, they were nearly 5 million. I think that's book sales. Pretty sure that's book sales, not money. Nearly 5 million in 2012. And over a 7-year period, it dropped to 3.5 million in 2019. So that's a pretty big decrease in the number of books being sold there. Okay, that's still a lot of friggin' books, right? Bookstore sales in general in the United States. So I was looking at a graph that charted them from 1992 through 2020. So that's a long time. The peak of that graph was in 2007. So, 14 years ago, 17.7 billion books sold in bookstores. And then in 2020, and this is after it bottomed out really badly in 2019 and then bumped up in 2020. It went back up to 8.84 billion. So that's less than half what it was in 2007 at the peak. So it looks like there's a general trend for people not buying books in bookstores. So typically, if you're not buying books in bookstores, you're buying them at, maybe Target, but definitely Amazon. And I was having trouble finding statistics on that. But in just generally polling people, that seems to be where a lot of people are buying their books. They're busy. They've got other stuff to do. In general, I don't go in bookstores. And I love books. But if I am thinking about a title I want, I don't go in a bookstore. I don't make a special trip and go get it. I will hop on Amazon and order it. Or, borrow it from somebody or the library if I can't buy it. Generally, I don't buy my books in bookstores. And it seems like there is a trend for people not buying their books in bookstores. So that, of course, brings up this idea that, why is it that we actually want to have our books in bookstores if people are buying fewer books in bookstores? And it's that vanity thing. It's, likes on posts. It's, hey, somebody gave me a shout out in a podcast. It's vanity. And, there's nothing I'm going to say that's bad about that. We all like that stuff. So how does this affect your book sales? This is what you want to know. And this is what I've been thinking about, because if they're not buying the books in bookstores, then how are you going to get your book in front of people? And as somebody who owns a publishing house, that's something I've been looking into, because I keep reaching out to distributors and thinking, this is going to be an answer. This is going to be something great for me to work with people and get their books in bookstores. But why do I need to do that? Is that where my authors are gonna meet their audience? Is my author's audience in bookstores? And it looks like, in general, no. Yeah, and Alex says, consider we also had population growth, so would expect more demand, and yet the numbers are down. Yes, yeah, there are more people on this planet every year, and yet the number of books being sold in bookstores is down. So here's a couple other things I wanted you to think about. So if you're pitching to a traditional publishing company, let's say you've written your book and you find an agent. First of all, to pitch to an agent, you have to demonstrate that you have some audience, especially if you have a nonfiction book. I mean, unless you're like Kim Kardashian or Oprah, which, I'm sure you're glad you're not Kim Kardashian, but, if you're pitching a book, you've got to have a substantial audience to be able to get the eye of a traditional publisher, because they don't want to put money behind a book that's gonna just sit on the shelf. Okay, so if a publisher is giving books to a bookstore, they expect those books to sell. And that's really what it comes back to. So if we as authors are putting out books that are sitting on the shelves of a bookstore, they're not doing us any good, because in general, people are specific in what they're looking for. There aren't a ton of people just going in and browsing for hours and hoping to run across a nonfiction book. In general, people are purposeful when they're looking for this stuff. And Deline says, bookstores and their online platforms are important for discoverability. It's harder to shop for new titles in the marketplace like Amazon because they are too full of noise. Yes, I agree with that. But that's where your book marketing comes into play. So if your book's available at a bookstore, you have to have that segment of the population that is willing to go to the bookstore as part of your audience. And if your segment of the population, your audience, isn't the group that's going in the bookstore and digging, then there's a much better chance that they are going to find you online, your audience, because you are marketing to them. You are getting in front of them. And, if you want to sell books, then that's the whole point to begin with. You want to be in front of that audience. So if your audience is at a bookstore, then yes, that's something you need to look at. But if not, there's a lesser chance that it's going to be successful for you. And I'm, reading on. So if you have that substantial audience, then you get to land a bigger, better deal with a publisher, because it's a sure thing, because they know that you're going to sell copies. Whereas if you are a lesser known person, there's less of a chance that you're going to be selling a lot of copies at a bookstore. And I was reading a New York Times article, and they said books with larger marketing campaigns behind them have a greater chance of being discovered at independent bookstores. So speaking to the bookstore idea, pitching to independent bookstores is a great way to get in front of people, because a lot of them have a following. Because they're independent bookstores, people have that community pride behind them. So this is actually a really good way to get your book out there. If you're looking at, the Pittsburgh area, I know everybody watching isn't in Pittsburgh, but there are little independent bookstores, and people can reach out to them and say, hey, would you be willing to stock my title, and talk to them about it. And I know there was one on the North Shore, and I can't remember the name of it, that I spoke with her for a while, and she said that they have a special local author section. Now, most of that, again, is fiction, so it's a little different for nonfiction, but reaching out to a local bookstore, you're going to have a better shot of being able to get in the door. You're going to have a better shot of actually holding an event there if you wanted to hold an event there. But again, it depends on the bookstore. So just thinking about what the importance of distribution and being in the stores is to you, I think that's something that you really have to step back and say, hey, is this where my audience is? So just giving you some food for thought, because, I've looked into the distribution question and it just doesn't sit well with me. I don't like the idea of having a book sitting there doing nothing. And if you have a book sitting there doing nothing, that's no fun. That's no good for you. And you want that book to be reaching your ideal customers, your ideal audience, your clients, whoever it is you're thinking. I actually heard from somebody today that they wrote their book several years ago, and they said no, they hadn't had a lot of sales of their book, but the sales have driven their business because they're getting people like 10K clients from reading a book because they have built that connection with them. And I think the analogy I used was like immersing in a deep pool of you. So think about it that way. If you're doing a speaking event, or if your book, let's say it's available at a local bookstore and people pick it up and say, oh, wow, hey, this is somebody I want to read. The way you write that book is going to be way more important, because you write that book to move people through that channel, help them know, like, and trust you, and actually get to the end point where, yeah, maybe they are going to go off and do it on their own, but if they know they need help, you're going to be the person that they reach out to. So a lot to think about there. I don't think I ever finished reading the quote. If you want to support debut authors or mid-list authors, so that would be new people who are, a little higher up, but they're not like the super big names, certain voices, these books are going to be more apparent in an independent bookstore. So think more about strategy instead of just, hey, I want my book in every Barnes & Noble across the country, because I've had experience with a title that was in all the Barnes & Nobles and it wasn't selling well. So it did that person no good whatsoever. So if you want to comment, I'm happy to have discussion about this. It looked like there was something else. I'm happy to have a discussion with this, but this is just some of the stuff I've been researching and thinking about. So yeah,